The Frasers are safe. We meet a bunch of new characters, and Claire kills again. That's coming right up in today's episode of Outlander Sunday. Hello folks, how are you doing, and welcome to today's episode of Outlander Sunday. We are back again. We have seen the brand new episode 402, Do No Harm. Wow, emotions. Outlander is one of these shows for me. It takes me on this journey of emotions, but I don't think I've ever quite felt the emotion of sorrow that I felt today. It was a heavy episode, a necessary episode, and also just very, very well done in my opinion. Let's get into that in just a little second. But first of all, I just want to say welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining in with my Outlander review show episodes. Please don't forget to hit that big red subscribe button down below so that you can keep in touch with all of my videos from now on. Join the clan and hit that notification bell, everyone. And I think we start episode 402 with a great sense of relief to see Jamie alive and looking quite well actually, and Claire, and then also young Ian and Rollo, after the savage attack at the end of last week's episode by Stephen Bonnet, that bandit from Ireland. Yep, as they were on their way to Riverrun on the boat, Stephen Bonnet entered, stole everything, beat Jamie up, killed Leslie, and we didn't know what their fate would be. We didn't know if anybody would have been kidnapped after that or what, but it is a relief to see the start of this episode, as sad as Jamie looks. But anyway, this episode introduced us to a lot of new things, and especially new characters. It was great to see a lot of new faces. First of all, Aunt Jocasta, played by Irish actor Maria Doyle Kennedy. She was absolutely superb. And this is going to be a big talking point for a lot of Outlander fans this week, is how she done. She was really, really good. I really enjoyed her character. There was something warm about her, but there was also something very, very intelligent about her as well. But I think the really cool thing at the start of the scene is when Jamie and Claire stepped off the boat at the plantation, at her big house, and met her for the first time. It was really emotional and just really fun, you know. It was just a great, happy, feel-good moment in the series. I think one of the funny things about Aunt Jocasta was her mannerisms. Actually, for the first time in watching Outlander, I've had some difficulties understanding one of the characters when they speak. And it wasn't the Scottish accent. I thought she did the Scottish accent really well. It was just the way she spoke. It was like a really old English. It was the way they used to muddle sentences back to front in the way that we perceive it today. But I thought that was a really interesting character trait and really important that they included it, and actually made the character stand out as well. And I'm intrigued as to how that character will progress in future. Another thing I really picked up on early on in this episode is the fact that young Ian and Rollo as well started to stand out as characters. Young Ian in particular, he was funny in this episode, really, really funny. He made me laugh a lot. As they were arriving in Riverrun, he made a comment that he didn't realise that Aunt Jocasta was rich and lived like a queen. And then also, Rollo got himself in a bit of bother because he chased after an animal that young Ian thought was a badger, but obviously it was later explained to him was a skunk. Young Ian made the comment about this animal squirting this foul-smelling liquid from its arse, as young Ian put it. It was just absolutely hilarious, the whole thing. That whole scene, I just really, really enjoyed those interactions. I like to see young Ian coming through as a really funny character. And this is really interesting for me because it's like the Fraser family, young Ian, Jamie and Claire are kind of exploring a new land where they don't know how things are. Young Ian doesn't know what a skunk is. He's never seen a skunk before. And for me, that is a really interesting concept because this is a new world. It's not a new world for us as we know it today, the continent of America, but in those days, everything would have been new for a Scotsman arriving in that country. So I think it's really funny to see those things being explored in Outlander, and really interesting as well. I'm really enjoying that part of the show. And then through young Ian, we also get to meet a new character, John Quincy Myers, a big hairy Welshman. You book readers will know a lot more about this guy than I do at the moment, but he seems like an interesting guy. I'm quite curious as to where he'll go. I don't get any bad vibes from him at all. I think he's going to be a great character and a friend of Jamie, Claire and young Ian. But he's also very funny. Him and Ian had this hilarious exchange about the Indians, because again, that is something that young Ian was totally new to, had no notion of what an Indian even would be. But I thought there was a really clever exchange in that part about where this episode was going. Kind of started the episode's whole theme off, right? Because obviously the people who were there were colonizers. They did a lot of bad things when settling the land, not least taking land away from the natives. And then when the white man notion of savagery comes out, young Ian piped up and he was like, but actually thinking about it, a lot of the clans in Scotland and the Scottish Highlands were pretty much the same. There was no difference between how they behaved and how these people were saying the native Indians behave as well. And I thought that was a really, really clever twist there. The episode soon takes a bit of a darker twist because we go from talking about native Indians and into slavery. Because of course River Run is a plantation and plantations were made on slavery. And that is really our introduction to the real theme of this whole episode. The badness of what slavery was and the horrible, horrible suffering involved. We start learning more about Aunt Jocasta. I've been calling her Aunt J for short. Her business and how she deals with things, the kind of crops that she grows, and that's through her talking with Jamie and Claire. And we can get the sense that Claire is really uncomfortable by the things she's seeing there. She interacts with a lot of the people who are kept as slaves in the plantation. She becomes quite close to Ulysses, the new character that we've been introduced, who's played excellently by Colin McFarlane. And the thing I thought was most curious about this whole thing is the fact that all these characters came in at once into the series, right? The only people that we knew in this episode were Jamie, Ian, and Claire, and Rollo as well. And yet all these new people instantly felt like family. It felt like they had been with us on this journey throughout. Maybe that's because they had been used in the trailers so often, but it definitely felt like these people were family. We were in a familiar place, in a safe place, and I thought that was a really interesting wavelength. I don't know what you guys thought about that, but reading on Twitter, it was interesting to see what other people thought about this kind of opening setup. Connie says, I am blown away. Ulysses, Jocasta, John Quincy Myers, Fidri, the sets, costumes, music, sound effects, emotions, surprises, the nuance, throwing shade, unintended consequences, and Rollo. Michelle Loves Roger Mack says, for me, out of all the episodes, Do No Harm was the most difficult to watch. Rufus, Ulysses, and Jocasta were incredible. Since we mentioned Rufus, let's talk about Rufus because that's a really important part of this episode. We get to meet a guy called Lieutenant Wolf. He's someone involved in the British setup in this colony, and like I just got really, really nasty, mean vibes from this guy. I didn't like him at all. Jocasta threw a house party welcoming Jamie and Claire and young Ian to River Run, and it quickly becomes apparent that actually this land is a big community of farmers, of plantation owners who all know each other, who are all Scots, Irish and Englishmen. They're British subjects who live in this area and who are exploiting the land and exploiting people. Aunt Jocasta announces to everybody without anybody else knowing that Jamie was going to be taking over the plantation. But the thing is, through conversations Claire and Jamie had been having, we already knew it's just not going to really work out very well because like slavery, Claire is never going to be okay with slavery. Knowing her personality and how she is coming from the future, she knows that slavery is a terrible thing, and people in that era, they just were not the same. So how could they run a business that was based on slavery when everybody around them, all those hundreds of people, were dependent on slavery as well? I already knew from the looks on the faces of the guests that the whole thing was going to come crashing down any minute. It was interesting as well at the party, I thought, to see young Ian talking about the Indians and how it was the settlers who had stolen their land, and how the people who were at the party just thought this whole notion was ridiculous and actually it was a threat, a clear threat to them and their livelihood. So with River Run left to Jamie, the big question is, could he and Claire manage the place under current circumstances? And I think it was very clear early on the answer to that would be no, because his conversations with people led to severe argument on the notion of slavery. Because the thing is, Claire was coming from our perspective that it's a bad thing and it can't happen, right? But we forget about the times, and it was explained to us that even if Claire and Jamie had rejected slavery, they would face fierce opposition, because their opposition would start ripples and that would affect the whole community of farmers and they wouldn't accept it. And as they were told in no uncertain terms, they would be killed if they tried to oppose slavery in the region. It was tested very early because Aunt Jocasta asked Jamie to go and resolve a little situation for her in the woods. And this is where the episode gets really, really dark really fast. And it was quite difficult to watch from here on in, especially if you don't like blood and guts and stuff, but this is a reality of the times. So basically one of the slaves on the farm, called Rufus, he had chopped a man's ear off. I think he was either a slave owner or basically somebody who works in the plantation in control of the slaves. Anyway, had his ear chopped off because he had lashed Rufus. It was retaliation. No slave was allowed to draw blood from any white man. The punish for that would be death. Claire and Jamie had been sent by Jocasta to solve the situation and to try and heal the man's ear, but instead what they see is the slave had been hung up to a tree with a hook that had been stuck into his gut. It was an awful, brutal, bloody scene. Claire and Jamie obviously were not going to be attending to the man with his ear cut off. They went to help Rufus. And then a fight ensued between Jamie and the man who had hung him up on a tree. Something I thought was interesting about this: Aunt Jocasta is obviously on the side of the law of the times, right, in terms of slavery and stuff. At the same time, she armed Jamie and Claire with guns. Why did she do that? Did she know that Jamie and Claire were going to be against these people? Claire and Jamie took them in and took them back to River Run. Even if you were a person who was against slavery and you wanted to do something about it, you basically couldn't, or you would end up dead. There was another interesting exchange between Ulysses, who came to Claire when she was trying to heal the guy, and said, if Rufus doesn't face the punishment, then other slaves will have to take his punishment instead. These were tough times, and they were really bad times. They were dark times when the law favoured people who were rich landlords. The reason I think this episode was so important to play out as it did is the fact that it was telling us that people were going to build their colonies in this new world, but they were doing so on the backs of other people. And then we learned from Rufus, he had been taken from Africa, he was telling Claire his story about his family, where he'd come from, and how he'd been stolen away from his land. It's a horrible, dark part of history, and I think it's important that Outlander is telling us that story. I think Outlander fans are going to have to give the show some leeway to actually tell these stories, because it is important for the story. It would be absolutely wrong for us to bulldoze into that time period in colonial America and not tell the stories of slavery. I think it would be irresponsible even. And what all this led to was a really, really difficult ending of this episode. Basically what we saw was the death of Rufus, but the way it happened was really, really played with our heartstrings. Farmers were really, really angry about how the whole thing played out, and they wanted to get revenge. They were going to kill Rufus. One way or another, they were going to kill him. And if Jamie and Claire stood against them, they would be killed as well, and River Run would be burnt to the ground. Jamie and Claire basically had to hand Rufus over, even though Claire had done a really good job of healing him, and he might have even recovered. The thing is though, slaves in those days, if they'd done something wrong and they were going to be killed, it would be a deeply, deeply unpleasant way to die, the way that was going to happen, and they knew this. So Claire and Jamie had this really difficult choice. They could not fight what was coming. It was unstoppable. So Jamie and Claire, were they going to hand Rufus over, who had kind of recovered a little bit? Were they going to hand him over to the people for him to be hung, drawn and quartered in a really kind of brutal manner? And they came to a really difficult and heartbreaking choice, and you could see the anguish on Claire's face that they would have to kill him some way humanely, because what he was going to face would be even worse. So Claire made a potion that made him fall to sleep, a poison that made him fall to sleep and die. Claire, one way or another, whether she was doing the right or wrong things, she ends up killing somebody yet again. But if you think about it, there was no choice for her. She had to do it, because the alternative would have been much worse. So in the end, Jamie was able to hand over the dead body of Rufus, who would no longer be suffering. And Jamie said a prayer over him as we closed out that scene, and it was just really so emotional, really deep and heavy. Now I have seen online a lot of people saying that scene and how Rufus died and all that type of stuff was a big change from how they did it in the books. I don't know how they did it in the books, I've not read that far on, but I'd be interested in your opinions nonetheless down below. Did you think the change was a good thing or not? I think in the TV series, from my perspective, the whole thing made sense, how it played out. It was very emotional, it tugged at my heartstrings, and it made me feel the pain and the anguish of the times. So it worked for me, but I don't know what you guys will think who have read the books. And it was interesting to see on Twitter, for example, a lot of people had some strong opinions on this episode and how it played out, and I'm going to share some of them with you. April says, "Thank you Outlander for never shying away from the tough subjects and scenes. It was uncomfortable to watch, especially at the end, but it was necessary to remember how cruel humanity can be." I mean, that just goes exactly to what I was saying. It was a difficult time, it was a cruel time, people were cruel, and that needs to play out when we're shown an episode that covers that time period. Shelley says, "Another brave and risky choice by Outlander writers and producers. The decent path forward always plows straight through the truth. And you did it." Emily says, "Incredibly heartbreaking episode. I thought the changes intensified the story and left no doubt that Jamie and Claire couldn't stay in River Run while confronting a difficult topic unflinchingly." And lastly, I really, really like this tweet. Outlander says, "Wow Outlander, you truly outdid yourself with episode 402, and there's not a more fitting time to ask for grace for humanity, as Jamie does, than Veterans or Remembrance Day." But anyway, it was a difficult episode to watch. It was really, really heartbreaking at the end. I felt really, really sad after watching it. You know what, I just hope we get young Ian coming in soon over the next episode really, really quickly, telling us something funny about Rollo smelling like the devil's arse. That'll cheer us up a little bit, because wow, that was heavy to watch. Really sad ending to see Rufus die. But I think from the end of that episode, we can assume that Jamie is going to end up turning down Aunt Jocasta's invite to manage the estate. But that said guys, as sad as the episode was, and as difficult as it was to watch, it was actually great. I really enjoyed it. I would love to know your opinion down below. What do you think about the things we've talked about and all the themes? I want to tell you guys about a wee giveaway that I'm doing of my merch, which you can find all the details about down below. Basically, I'm going to be giving away 2 t-shirts away. This channel right here is where I do in-depth discussions about these types of pop culture and Scottish culture and all that type of stuff, and vlogumentaries. But the other new channel, which is branded Adventure Everything, basically my behind the scenes of producing this channel. Behind the scenes, my life, my travels, my adventures, the things that you don't get to see on this channel. All you need to do is hit the subscribe link to that channel, subscribe, and then comment on my most recent video letting me know you've done so. But that channel is basically going to be an outlet for letting you guys know what I'm up to in my day-to-day life outside of producing these shows on this channel. Where I am in the world, for example, at this very moment in time, I'm in Brazil. It's been a long road to get here, and you'll find all of that out of how I got there on this other channel, Adventure Everything, my Adventure Everything branded channel. Adventure Everything is not only my brand, but is also really my business, my company, and I want to be telling you guys the behind the scenes of what I do there and what I do in my daily life. I'm going to announce the winners when I release my next video on that channel, which will be this Wednesday in a couple of days from the release of this vlog. It's just awesome to have you on this journey with me. It really means a lot, and it's awesome to have your support, so I just want to say a big thank you, really. Outlander Sundays, thank you so much for joining in, and until the next adventure, I hope you have a great night, morning, evening, afternoon, or whatever time of day it is, wherever you are in the world. Take care.